So what is a properly exposed image, and how do we get one? As we've seen in previous lessons, exposure equals iris plus shutter plus sensitivity plus ND. And for proper exposure, nothing should clip, nothing should crush, and the skin should be bright, between 60 and 70 IRE. Number 1. Set your target iris first for depth of field. If you plan on shading by iris, aim for a middle value like 5.6, so you have plenty of leeway up and down. If you're going for a shallower depth of field, start closer to 2.8, so you can compensate for all the additional light that will be coming in as you make further adjustments. 2. Set the shutter, 360 degrees for broadcast style productions and 180 degrees for cinematic productions. 3. Set the sensitivity to 0 dB, near or below a native ISO point on the camera. And 4. Filter is needed. Add or remove ND if required. If the image is too dark, open up the iris or turn up the sensitivity. If the image is too bright, add more ND or turn down the sensitivity. In extremely bright settings like outdoors, full ND and lowest sensitivity may still not be enough. In that case, you'll either have to close the iris, turn up the shutter, or add an additional external ND to the end of the lens. Finally, remember to expose for your subject, not the scene. If you need to make the choice between the subject being in the shadows or letting some part of the scene highlights clip, let the highlights clip. In an ideal world, you can work with whomever is in charge of lighting to get the best of both worlds, but it's really common to have a strong reflective highlight on things like guitars, or a light in the background, or a window perhaps, that's so far out of your exposure range that you can never keep that highlight from clipping without radically underexposing everything else in the shot to compensate. Now let's discuss some further exposure tips and tricks. Number 1, when exposing for a person, make sure to watch for clipping on the backs of the hands, the forehead, and the tip of the nose. Since these areas don't directly face the camera, and there's often backlight on a speaker or preacher, make sure to watch for clipping in these areas even if the rest of the image looks properly exposed. You can often fix this by exposing down slightly or reducing the amount of backlight. Number 2, you can make your cameras look like they're better than they are by avoiding bright clothing, especially white. By eliminating white from the scene, it's possible to expose slightly higher and get more detail in skin and shadows than you would normally be able to get before clipping occurs. Number 3, if you or your team are having a hard time hitting focus, especially on a long telephoto lens, take out an ND filter to let more light in, and then iris down the lens to help increase the depth of field and make it easier for your operator to nail focus. Number 4, don't do it all by eye. Use an exposure aid like zebras, false color, or scopes to get an objective feedback on exposure settings. These tools are designed to help you make exposure decisions with much more consistency than your eyes are able to do. And that's going to cover it for setting exposure. In review, 1, set your target iris first for depth of field. 2, set the shutter. 3, set the sensitivity to 0. And 4, filter is needed. We'll talk more about using exposure tools in our very next lesson.